Welcome to Deep Look. Keith Rayner here. We are here for Ulti World's weekly live podcast about what's going on in Ultimate. Appreciate you joining us for the live stream. No Charlie Eisenden today, but I am joined by a special guest. We're going to start right away with an interview with the president of the World Flying Disc Federation, Nob Rauch. Nob, thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Good to see you here today.
Absolutely. Great to have you on with so much going on for the World Flying Disc Federation. And of course, WUC coming up is one of the big things on the calendar this year. And we're going to get into talking about that. But, I wanted to ask right off the bat, how has the organization been? Obviously the pandemic had a big effect that's really lasted for a couple of years for a number of different organizations. How's the organization been faring in coming back from that period of time?
Well, I'm pretty happy to say that I feel like we're back on track. Clearly, COVID had a miserable impact, not only on WFDF and International Ultimate, but all of our member federations as well. And I think that lasting impact. WFDF is an organization of member federations, but it's our member federations who oversee the actual players and most of the competition that happens. And so we're seeing different recovery stages in different countries around the world, but obviously that really had a big impact on everything. The fact that for many places there was no competition for at least a year, if not a full 2 years, as we experienced with WFDF, really had a big negative impact on participation, on youth development, on player development, and it's hard to recover from that. WFDF was in pretty good shape. We do an annual risk assessment every year. One of our risk factors that we always focus on is what happens if our event schedule gets disrupted for some reason. And our mitigant for that has always been, look, we got to be conservative. We need to have a budget for a rainy day, and we ended up having to rely on that budget. We in 22 we gave basically a 50% discount on dues for all of our member federations, understanding the difficulties they were having, but we were able to manage with just some sort of a partial cutback in people's hours, but maintain the staffing that we did have to be able to get ready for the recovery phase. So here we are, 23, 24. We had a great year for events last year across the board. We have a full event schedule this year. We put together our new strategic plan for the period 23 through 28, which we debuted last fall time. And we're pulling out what we're calling WFDF 3.0. We want to come out of COVID not only as good as we were going in, but better. And part of that was to be able to make sure that we had the internal resources to be able to support our member federations. And as part and parcel of that, we actually hired 3 new people just in the last month and a half. Sam Kell for our communications, Dylan Richardson, to work more closely with our member federations, giving them support in areas where maybe they can't do it as well as they'd like, and then as well for office management, with Alexandra joining us. And the elements that we are focused on in our strategic plan, really there's 2 main ones. Youth development, which we think is the key to Ultimate's future, to disc golf's future. We really need to get more kids playing. If you look at the world of sport, it's a pyramid. You have the biggest base with youth, and then it diverges. You have a path for elite athletes pursuing their careers and at the highest levels of competition. And that's something which basically comes to an end for virtually everybody at some point. And then you have the recreational side, which again is a pretty broad group of people who are playing for fun, whether it's playing in a local league or going to smaller tournaments near your area in Ultimate, or just playing in the local disc golf course. And so we're seeing that and really looking to develop that youth base so that we can grow the sport. And that's really going to be the key to the future for us. If we look at the official side of things, we're in the full swing of things with respect to sport organization globally. Just last weekend, Volker Bernardi and I were up at Sport Accord in Birmingham, England, which is the annual gathering of the Olympic movement federations and organizations that support it, including the IOC. We had meetings with the IOC Sport Department. We had a really interesting meeting with ANOC, which is the Association of National Olympic Committees, a very powerful and important group within the Olympic movement. Met with the Queensland Tourist Bureau, who is a supporter of our World Ultimate Championships down in Gold Coast later this year, and a whole variety of other meetings. And so I think we're back on track and really looking to take a next step. WFDF 3.0 is really our code word for saying we want to get to a point where we are able to perform at a level that is equal to, if not surpassing, certain of the Olympic program sports.
It's great to hear that the organization is in a position to hire new people and bring in new folks who can help push the organization forward. And for our audience, who folks who are joining us live on YouTube, you can drop your questions in the chat if you have any that come up for Nob. But our audience, I think, mostly is familiar with WFDF for running these high-level elite competition events. So I'm curious, what does it look like for WFDF to be able to help grow youth ultimate at a broad base? Because I that parallels a lot of the focus of what we're seeing in USA Ultimate. And for a national organization, I think it's a little more obvious how they can impact their local community. What does WFDF's support of growing the broad base of youth ultimate actually look like?
I think it's really providing the basic resources that can then be tropicalized for members depending on the structure and format of the school system, physical education, the club system for sport. Europe has a huge club system. And so the kinds of things we're looking at are development of teaching curricula, not just for ultimate, but basically for kids who are even smaller than that, where really what you want to do is just get them handling a piece of plastic and learning how to do basic throws and catches. And as part of that, you need to be able to have a curriculum that's designed for a teacher who may not be familiar with flying disc in any way, and to make it fun. And so we're looking right now at continuing to develop the basic curricula that have been set up, to be able to expand on that, to be able to do a lot more in the video space in terms of teaching videos that can then be used by our local member federations. And a big part of this as well is we're looking at what it's going to take to basically provide these resources in the 8 to 10 major languages so that it's accessible, not just in the English-speaking parts of the world, but around. And so, it's something on our development priority list to really take a look at what we have and to say, what does it take to actually make this more accessible? Part of Dylan's job will be really to focus on that and to get it done. And then with Sam Kell on the communication side, we want to really expand our social media presence, expand what we're doing, not just on reporting on events or the administrative aspects, but to put out a lot more short form video clip material, things that are interesting, things that can be used to spark interest of kids, of educators, and to really supplement and support what we're trying to do more formally.
On that note, WFDF just recently put out a new YouTube video that I think maybe felt like for a lot of people they had no idea that was coming. It's Ultimate Frisbee, a worldwide sport. It's sort of like a 90-second, very like light on info. It's not a deep dive into what Ultimate's about, but just very introductory. What was up with that video? Is that something that's a part of the strategy? What's the goal behind that type of a type of media?
Sure. I think, part of the feedback we have gotten from friends of ours in the Olympic movement at fairly high levels is that we don't have enough visibility of our sport for, the broad unwashed masses, who are not a part of the flying disc community. And so I think we really want to make an effort to broaden that visibility, put it in bite-sized pieces that pique someone's interest, so that if they see something like that, they can say, where do I find out more? I think at the World Beach Championship, I think we produced 50 games. Well, your typical person doesn't have interest in watching an entire game, let alone 50 of them. But they may be interested to actually do that if they see something that draws them in, but they're not automatically going to go and say, let me be an Ulti World subscriber and just take advantage of the wealth of data of content that you guys produce. And so that particular video was produced with a specific intent, which was this was a part of the pitch that we presented to the Brisbane 2032 organizing committee of the Olympic Games 2 weeks ago. But it was done with the idea that it has much broader use as well.
Of course. Interesting to hear about the Brisbane Games. Obviously, will be in Australia in August for WUC, but right now the next Summer Olympic Games in 2028, you've got China coming up, or China for the World Games. So you got the U.S. in LA for 2028 for the Olympic Games, and Ultimate didn't make the program. I know that was a big push on the part of the international Ultimate community to try and get Ultimate into that program. Were you surprised, disappointed? What's your take on not making it into the Olympic program? And it obviously hasn't deterred the organization from continuing to pursue the Olympic dream.
Well, I think, if there's a couple different comments I'll make and then talk specifically about that experience. Every time we do a survey, our members, basically 50% of our members, want pursuit of the Olympics to be a very high priority, basically highest priority or an extremely high priority, but not to the exclusion of everything else we're doing. Only about 10% say, no, don't do it at all. And so, that feedback we get not just from the broad community when we do our surveys, and it's been consistent in the 4 that we've done, but also with our national federations. This continues to be an important goal. And so, it is something that we pursue. We have we're sort of playing the long game for that, understand that it is difficult. There's been sports like squash, which just got in, who have been very actively pursuing this for decades. I think if you look at the sports that did make the final cut, these are the big money U.S. sports. And I think, the fact of the matter is LA has always been a commercially oriented organizer of the games. Certainly 84, they were very successful. And I think Casey Wasserman, who's chair, intends for this to be another very successful privately run enterprise. NFL with flag football, baseball, softball, cricket, one of the hugest sports in the Commonwealth. All of these are incredibly well-funded organizations with a very strong desire to see that showcase. And so I do think it's interesting. The issue of quota is imperative within the Olympic movement. Their goal is to try to limit the number of athletes to 10,500, with LA bringing in several different team sports, even though each of those team sports is coming in with a modified format similar to what Rugby Sevens did versus the regular game with 15s on a side back in 2016. You have football, a flag format. You have baseball fives. Lacrosse sixes. I think everyone has recognized that the Olympics may not be where you get to showcase the game that you want to showcase, but it nonetheless gives you the visibility that will pique the interest, that will help in bolstering that youth development goal that I think every sport has today. And obviously everything is changing in the world of sport in terms of the way people participate, the way people consume, spectate, the way the audiences react. And so I think, we're going to continue to see a further redefinition of sport. It doesn't mean that it's the end of the game that we love. It just means that, there may be a showcase that we do that really gives us a front row, a front row and center audience to present to. But I think our sport continues to be very strong at the competitive and elite levels, at many of the recreational levels. But we're sort of slowing down, and I think we need to do what we can to promote it at many different levels. If you look at the outcome of LA, they had a 2-part process. Each games where there has been a host city designate, which is a new opportunity provided by the IOC under their Agenda 2020 to try to instill a little more oomph into the games, get it a little more relevant. There's been a different process. So LA had a short list of 9 sports, brought it down to 5. Brisbane, still too early for them. They're not quite sure what they're going to do. I do think that they will take a different approach. We're excited because Australia has had a very strong program for a couple decades now, since they first broke out on the scene in 1988 in a world championship. They've won silver in 3 of the last 5 editions and got a bronze in one of the others. And so the elements that we push are basically the elements that we love about our game. It is youth oriented. It's fun, fast paced. It's a joy to watch and play. We have gender equality on many, many different levels. Certainly the mixed game, which is what we will be pushing, is pretty unique because it's legit. You have sports that are coming up with sort of something that they call a mixed offering, but it's not really legit. It's not a competitive division. For ultimate, certainly mixed is a huge competitive draw. And in our emerging members in Southeast Asia, Latin America, Eastern Europe, mixed is the biggest division of play. And so I think all of those elements are things that we're pushing, not to mention the most important, which is spirit of the game. WFDF continues to use game advisors, but not even observers who make calls. We try to keep the call with the players. We continue to push on that. Any of our discussions with Olympic committee members, with the sports department, no one's ever mentioned this as a obstacle. They're sort of fascinated by the idea that it works. And I think the game advisor addition that we brought in after the 2013 World Games has really fix the potential for issues, because the game advisor is there to assist in the resolution of a call without having to make it. And it seems to work pretty well. It's sped up the game. That's critical, I think, when we're looking to build a video audience, and especially a video audience beyond our endemic flying disc community. And so all of those are elements we think put us at least in the running to be considered for 2032. As I said, we were down in Brisbane. I was going to say we were down in Brisbane 2 weeks ago. In addition to meeting with our local member federation, AFDA, and with our tournament organizing committee for Worlds, we did have a good 1 hour meeting with the CEO, Cindy Hook, and the director of sport, Brendan Keene. I was accompanied by a couple of the members of the board of AFDA and with Matt Ryan, the tournament director. We had a great meeting. They're open to hearing it. It's we haven't gotten through Paris yet, and so obviously these are still early days. But I think we're on the radar screen, and we'll see how it shakes out.
Well, you mentioned sports, going into kind of alternative formats of their traditional setting. Do you think that it's more likely that we'll see something that isn't 7-on-7 grass ultimate make it in the Olympics? One person in the chat suggested potentially multidiscipline, having a package of ultimate and disc golf and freestyle, or could you see 4-on-4 beach or some other format? Do you think one of those is actually more likely to be the ticket in over the 7-on-7 grass play?
Well, I think the difficulty with 7-on-7 comes down to the quota. Doesn't mean it can't happen. We basically presented 3 different formats. We said, here's our traditional game. We play it at the World Games. It's tested. It works. No risk. But if quota, comes down to quota, we actually think for World Games beach would be, for the 2032 Olympics in Brisbane, beach would be absolutely ideal. They have that is a gorgeous coastline up and down the whole East Coast, and so I think that beach may be perhaps our best possibility of getting in. But alternatively, the possibility of Ultimate Fours is still there. We're planning to do a few test events in the next year or so, and just sort of prove concept. We know that there are a lot of places where people have been playing 4-on-4s because they don't have the space, especially in a lot of Latin American countries and in Asia. And 4-on-4 works really well. It also really fits in with the concept that has been going on for decades now with indoor ultimate, where it's proven to be able to be played, in a large field house or even on basketball courts. And so I think that's one of the joys of ultimate, is that it can be played in a whole myriad of formats, but it's still all ultimate.
One space that from what we hear that you've seen a lot of growth or that the community has grown explosively is in China. And it's kind of a black box from the outside. We don't really quite know what the growth of Chinese ultimate looks like. Do you have any perspective into what it looks like in China, and if we're seeing the type of growth that could be a change maker?
It's really funny. If you were to go into social media, what you would find is that ultimate is a fashion sport. People think it's cool. They play mixed, and they'll go out there kitted out. It's really sort of funny. But if you look at that kind of attention that comes, and there's a number of influencers within the Chinese social media space who have taken it up. The social media presence went through the roof in mid 2022, where from an admittedly relatively low base. If you did a search for flying disc in their main social media app, the number of posts increased tenfold, or actually 12-fold in mid 2022. And there was a report done in China, like they like to do reports on things. And so the report, New Sports for Young People in 2022, Ultimate was number one, ahead of skateboarding, urban cycling, fitness classes, and rock climbing. And they've managed to start really building some of the base to continue that growth. Ultimate was included in the 2022 compulsory education curriculum program and standards by the Ministry of Education in China. And 10,000 plus schools started flying disc physical education classes in 2022. It's currently played in over 200 universities in China, which sounds like a lot, although that's still a small part of the university system. And they started a Chinese Ultimate League as well, across 14 cities. And so they were able to get quite a bit of coverage. They got 9 national media enterprises in China to come out and cover them, including the People's Daily Online, CCTV, and others, and a bunch of municipal and provincial coverage, and as well coverage on 15 major internet platforms, media platforms in China. And so it's sort of remarkable. The organization there is a part of the apparatus of the Chinese government. You don't get anything unless you are. And they've managed to try to find a way to navigate that system while still preserving the basic elements that keep Ultimate being Ultimate. I know that there are some things that haven't been working out as well as they should be in terms of some of the representativeness on national teams are sending to Worlds, or even a willingness to send. And so we're actually having a meeting next Tuesday in Frankfurt with the head of our Chinese group and a local provincial sports minister who's looking to sponsor an office space for the Continental Association that WFDF has in Asia and Oceanic region. And as part of that, we'll have the time to really dig in a little deeper and find out what's been going on, and hopefully find a way to make sure that they can do things a little more the way that I think the total community would like to. It was interesting. I got asked to speak at a life sport conference in Chengdu last November, and until you're in China, it's really hard to imagine just the magnitude of what goes on in the country. But many people probably outside of those who know where the World Games are, who are listening to this blog, have probably never heard of the city of Chengdu, but it's a city of 16 million people. It's the 4th largest city in China. And I think what we're going to see is that the World Games next year are going to be really well run. I think we're going to continue to see China aspire to build out not just the core Olympic sports, but trend sports such as Ultimate and the parlance used by the World Games, to really show that face. Even though we have seen a bit of a more parochial approach with the recent government in the last decade or so, but on the area of sport, they still seem to be fairly outward-looking.
It's fascinating to hear about them. I'm very curious to what that's going to start to look like on the international level. It may take some time to gestate, but we could see Chinese Ultimate become an international power that competes with the stalwarts of the Ultimate scene, which would be a fun shakeup. Another topic that I know that I've seen brought up a lot by our audience, and I want to make sure I get a chance to ask you about before we wrap up. is for WFDF, with the crisis going on in Gaza and the conflict with Israel. There are a lot of folks who are looking to WFDF to take a stance, to have a public position as it pertains to that crisis. Is there anything planned from WFDF's side to have a public statement, or is there any that you'd like to make?
So we have actually spent a lot of time discussing this at the board level. It's been discussed at 4 different board level meetings. I've had discussions with Daniel Benura, one-on-one, and have met with several other people as well to understand, try to understand all sides of the issues. You may imagine that, after the original attack on October 7, we got quite a communication from our member association in Israel, sort of in agony over what was going on. And then I listened to Daniel and others who are promoting the Palestinian perspective. Palestine is also a member of WFDF, and it absolutely causes me and everyone else within the organization an incredible amount of agony. It's just such a horrible humanitarian crisis. It is, the atrocities that have been committed from both sides are unconscionable. And it's really hard as a sports organization with limited resources to try to sort out and come out with a statement with full knowledge and understanding when the professional politicians haven't been able to figure it out. We look at the at the situation. It's not just something that began last October 7. It's not just something that began 75 years ago. This has been going on for millennia. And I think the perspective we have taken was articulated in a statement we made quite early on, I forget, it was the 7th of November perhaps, decrying the violence, on both sides. It's just, but it's also very difficult as a sports organization largely made up of volunteers to be able to unwind all of the issues and be able to come out with a statement that makes sense. There's a reason why sport organizations in general try to stay out of the political arena, and that's because it's so complicated. There are typically two sides of the issues. I know that several people have said, well, you came out and took a stand vis-a-vis the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I guess what I would say is, there's not an equivalence between the two situations for two reasons. One, the Russian aggression basically started in 2014 with the invasion of Crimea and the Donbass region, and then was repeated, February of 2022. It was a unilateral, one-way aggression. The second was that the IOC came out and rallied the entire world of sport because it was such a violation of so many different things, including the Olympic truce, which had been in place. It came on the back of a huge systemic national doping scandal. And so that call for the entire community, basically in a country where sport is a big part of the political propaganda and the political standing, by having all sports organizations come out with a unanimous ban, really made a strong political statement. With respect to the Palestine situation, we absolutely abhor the humanitarian crisis, and we understand that it is not necessarily symmetrical. But us taking a stand on a complicated issue where we can't begin to understand, what's really going on all levels, on both sides, was going to have no benefit to the situation outside of ameliorating the feelings and opinions of a small but vocal group within our flying disc community globally. And so I think that's the reason why we've had a different approach on the two different situations. Doesn't mean we aren't monitoring it. Doesn't mean we find it appalling. Doesn't mean we find it horrendous. But we just don't feel like there's anything we realistically can add by trying to add our voice, because we can't really get to a clear position that says we take one side versus the other. We just think that the military and politicians of both groups, should all just disappear and let the people get along the way that they probably would if the politicians and military weren't so powerful in both areas.
Okay, well, thank you very much, for coming on the show and joining us today. Looking forward to WC out in Australia.
I'm really looking forward to that. I know a lot of people had difficulty in getting to Australia, having just bought a ticket. It's incredibly expensive, but we're going to have 49 teams at the WC, 22 countries, 1,160 players. And we're having a very strong guts division as well, with 6 countries represented, and, including the first women's division. So I think it's going to be a really exciting time in Gold Coast. And we hope everyone is either there or watching. And I want to thank you very much for having me on the show today.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nob. I will talk to you soon. Folks, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Deep Look. Don't go anywhere.
Hey, this is Robin Fennig. One of the only things that we have to bring to an ultimate tournament are our cleats. And every player has a cleat story, right? Mine took place in 2022 when Noise slayed our regional rival Dragon Thrust on Universe Point in a rainy semifinal at the USA Ultimate Club Championships. In my toe case, I didn't have to change a single thing about how I cut to get open for resets. I was so lost in the moment that I didn't even know it was Universe Point when I threw the game-winning hug to Dylan DeClerc. Toke cleats are specifically designed for Ultimate, with a cleat pattern for the game's sharp cuts and a durable, breathable, supportive build to keep your feet and ankles protected and comfortable for longer. That's why I've been using them for over 6 years. They're my best ally in the field. You put your best self on the field, so make sure you're bringing the best with you at tokeultimate.com. That's TOKAY-ultimate.com. Toke, sky the limits.
Heads up, Breakmark now has sublimated 5-panel hat. You can get the hat and their famous reversible free with the purchase of one of their 3-piece team bundles, starting at just $85. Get all the details at breakmark.com. Welcome back to Deep Look. Keith Rayner here. No Charlie Eisenhood today, so going to take you through some of the other items going on in Ultimate as the postseason begins in college. So we've got some news there. But first up, our trivia question of the week. Don't think Charlie's going to get this one right, but you at home can play along. So our trivia question for this week. Wanted to talk about conferences. That's what's been going on here. So who are the last D1 national champions to fail to win their conference the year that they won the national title? So the last Division I national champion who failed to win their own conference in the same year that they won their national title. I'll give you a little bit to think about which teams maybe it could be. And you could pick your women's division or men's division. We'll take either one. So take a moment to think about that, and we'll talk a little bit about our friends over at Sunset Lakes. Now, this Saturday is April 20th, and you can get ready for a lovely weekend by taking advantage of discounted pricing over at Sunset Lake CBD. Right now, you can get 30% discount on everything at sunsetlakecbd.com. If you use the coupon code 420, if you spend over $100, you get a free jar of 20 Vibe gummies too, and 4.2% of the proceeds will go to the Last Prisoner Project, which last year Sunset Lake helped raise over $22,000 for cannabis criminal justice reform, and they are trying to beat that this year. Now, this morning, true story, I had a coworker text me, say, I'm having some trouble focusing at work today. And I recommended two things. I said, try an on-off system. Maybe you get out your timer, you work maybe for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then take 5-10 minutes off and just do that over and over again until you feel like you got some rhythm and you're back to focus. Or in addition to, use some Sunset Lake CBD focused gummies. That's what I've got. I've got some literally on my desk right here. Take those when I'm feeling like I can't get my sharpest mind on your work. That'll help you sharpen up, and that'll get you through your workday. Maybe you're studying. Maybe you're doing a film session. You're breaking down, trying to get ready for conferences and regionals. You want to make sure your team moves on the postseason. Got to be focused at film study, so some CBD gummies could help you there. You can get those focus gummies or other products at sunsetlakecbd.com. The sale ends April 22nd. You can see their site for additional terms and conditions. Farmer-owned, Vermont-grown, Sunset Lake CBD. So back to our trivia question. This week, who are the last D1 national champions to fail to win their conferences in the same year they won the national title? Got you from the men's division and the women's division. The most recent was in the men's division, and I think people maybe got this one because I feel like it's notable. Like I remember this happening, and that's UNC in 2015. They lost to UNC Wilmington in the final. That was like the John Nethercutt, Ben Snell, JD Hastings was on UNC instead of Wilmington, Nathan Kwan group, and they were like, it was like young Jack Williams and Xavier Maxstad and Luke Hancock. They beat UNC at conferences. So UNC ended up turning around and win the national title. And the last time it happened in the women's division, 2012, that's Washington in 2012, failed to even make the final at their conferences. Cascadia Conference is famously hard. We're going to talk more about that. But they lost to UBC and Oregon. That Washington team was like Lucy Williams was on that team, and Alicia Letourneau. And they ended up losing to like Oregon with Beth Kaler and Sophie Darch, and the UBC team was like Chewy and Rena Kawabata. So pretty stacked rosters up in Cascadia. So those are your last ones that I could find. Someone in the chat, Joe says Minnesota men's in 2016. I think that they won their conference. They may have lost a game, but I think that they won. What are they? Northwoods? Is that right? I'm digging here to try and get into my conferences knowledge, which is what we're going to need in this episode, because we're going to play a little small ball. So we're going to touch on some of what's been going on at conferences, because we have teams that have qualified for the college championships in Division III. We've already got teams that have qualified. For those who are not familiar, some regions/conferences, they call them Comf Regionals. That's what our staff has taken to call them. I don't know if that's caught on or not. I saw it on social media. So somebody's saying it, but the North Central, they had a wild weekend out in D3. McAllister, the Purse Snatchers. This team was unranked like 4 weeks ago. They are now, they were number 8 coming into this tournament, number 8 in our power rankings, and they take it down. They take the region over the big names, number 1 ranked power ranking team, St. Olaf. They don't win. They fall to the Purse Snatchers in the final 7-6. They beat Carleton Eclipse, obviously one of the biggest names in D3 women's along the way. So they end up winning the North Central. What a wild turn of events out there. Grinnell also qualified in that group. Michigan Tech ends up missing the cut in a really difficult region, but wow, take me back to the beginning of the season. No, there's no preseason prediction you're going to find that was like McAllister is going to be the North Central champ over the likes of St. Olaf and Carleton. Wow, this is, you come to expect this from D3 because folks, it gets even more crazy out of D3. Go out to the Northwest in the women's division. The number 2 overall team. I think there's some argument that this could have been your national title favorite coming into the weekend. Whitman fails to qualify for the championships. Some parallels to last year with Oklahoma Christian in the men's division. They were like number 1. They failed to qualify for nationals. So, I mean, upsets galore in Division 3. Whitman was up in the final on Portland, who's like number 3. I mean, this is a totally reasonable team to lose to, but they were winning that game. Star player Gemma Monk, I think, got hurt during the final. Portland's able to fight back, get the win, and then Whitman turns around. They have to play Lewis and Clark and just got ran out. Tough way for the season to end. Congratulations to both Portland and Lewis and Clark and all of the Nationals qualifiers that have already been crowned. Happy to see teams making it, especially those who maybe didn't expect it. But somebody's got to miss if somebody's going to make it. Going out to Southeast in D3 men's. Drama. We knew this one was coming. We knew we were going to get an exciting matchup between Barry and Ave Maria. I mean, you have teams that were 10 and 11. Ave Maria, like narrow favorite, but I think most people would have said Barry is the favorite given their history coming into the game. They go to Universe Point in this one, so we get all the drama, and it comes down to Barry star Colin Hill. We'll take a look at how Barry pulled this off on Universe Point. Layout catch from the star player to make it back to nationals for the Barry Bucks. Great run for Ave Maria, but couldn't quite pull it off. And as you heard, there was a lot of wind. I don't know if it was like that across the entire country, but it definitely was windy where I am, and I heard a lot of tournaments were really affected by wind. I know that was the case in North Central women's as well. So I think conferences really got blasted by the wind across the country. And so that could have led to some wonky results. Definitely could tie down scores. I know personally, I find it really disappointing to show up to like a tournament that maybe you spent, especially if you're a team that's like focused on getting the regionals, that's your primary goal, to show up to conferences, which is essentially then you're like your biggest tournament of the year. And it's like a wind fest. Is so frustrating and disappointing. So sorry to anybody who had to suffer through that, but we do get some qualifiers. We also had a couple other teams that qualified in the Northwest men's, Whitman and Lewis and Clark get the wins there. In the Atlantic Coast, Richmond takes down Davidson. In the women's division final, had some young stars from Seattle battling it out there. Virginia Barber from Davidson couldn't quite get it out over Richmond. They were led by Lucy Sevitson. So some impressive performances there in the AC. See what those teams can bring to nationals. And then there was a cool. I don't think we actually have this one, but there was a little change for places where there's basically just like one team, like the Southwest women's famously. They typically don't. They just used to play one game, and in some cases they would literally just let the rankings decide. Whoever was the higher ranked team, you didn't even have to play to get to nationals if you had to. They changed that this year, so we actually got games between those two teams, and they played a 3-game series. So out in Southwest D3 women's, Claremont and Occidental played a 3-game series. They split the first game, so they had to play game 3, and it went down 7-5. Occidental gets the win over Claremont to qualify for the college championship. So a couple of different teams making those qualifiers, and excited. A 3-game series for all the marbles. That's hype. That's exciting, and that is a very welcome change to the format, because having the teams not play just always felt like underwhelming. Disappointing way to wrap up the year, especially for qualifying for nationals. In Division 1, head out to Big Sky I'd say this is one of my top stories coming out of the weekend. Utah State, a team that I think was kind of burgeoning they're going to be in the mix for nationals at that very competitive Northwest. Utah gets the win in the region, but Utah Valley jumps in to the final. Utah State losing to Utah in the semifinals 13-9 after losing to Utah Valley in pool play, and not close, 15-7. So I don't know. Is it warning signs for Utah State? Are they going to be at the bottom of the pecking order at fighting for that second bid or fighting in Northwest Regionals? I guess I can't crown Oregon ego yet, but exciting stuff out in the Northwest. We're already getting some drama on that front. Other notes there weren't a ton of other big results at conferences across the country in D1. You had WashU in the men's division. They were trailing in the conference final. You had UVic out in Northwest. I mean, when you look at Cascadia in D1 women's, I mean, this is a just absolutely stacked region. I mean, our conference, we talked about this. Look at this conference: UBC, Oregon, Victoria, Washington, Western Washington, 5 ranked teams out of 7 in your conference, many of whom are competing for actually going to nationals and being a strong competitor. This is probably the strongest conference in the country in D1, certainly. And Victoria gets an upset win over Washington pretty emphatically. So that's a big one. Keep an eye on that. I've been waiting on this UVic team to start to show some flashes. They had a tough regular season, always competing in strong competition, but big results to speak of. And this may be one of the best ones. I will caution anybody from reading too much into conference results, especially when it was already pretty likely you were going to get to regionals. There is some seeding components to that, but I wouldn't read too much into conference results as far as totally casting doubts on teams. But you like to see teams play well rather than poorly. So note on that. And final one to note specifically from conferences out in the women's division, Pennsylvania conferences, you get potentially the 2 favorites to win the region in UPenn and Pittsburgh. They played in the finals. Penn gets the win 12-9. I believe one of our reporters said it was a 5-year conference streak for Pittsburgh that was snapped. So UPenn taking that one down. Keep an eye on that UPenn team. I don't know exactly who's the favorite in Ohio Valley. I think there's a very strong argument for UPenn that they have the strongest resume, but Ohio Valley Women's Regionals is probably going to be one of the most exciting regional tournaments that we're going to get. So a little preview here. Penn gets the first victory in the series against Pittsburgh. That's going to wrap us up just for our conference results. I do want to mention another occurrence at conferences, not a result per se, but we're going back to Southeast men's D3. I noticed down at the bottom of the standings, Morehouse College makes it 2 conferences. We did a story on them a couple of years ago about them starting a team. They were doing some scrimmages. There was a lot of community support and encouragement for these first-time HBCU teams. We hadn't really seen them before, but Morehouse was one of those 2 teams, and they hadn't really been able to get it quite together to field a team in the series. So I believe this is their first full appearance in the series. St. Augustine was the other team. I don't know if they've actually made it in the series yet, but awesome to see Morehouse making it out to the conference championships. I wouldn't be surprised to see them climbing up the standings over the next couple of years, but cool to see. I've always thought about what it will be like if there's HBCU teams competing, and it's very cool to see that those teams are out there and be successful. So that pretty much wraps us up for our stories from conferences, and that's going to do it for our small ball. So before we head out, I want to hit on our question of the week this week. Again, for anybody who wants to ask a question of the week, you can do so in our Discord, or you can reach out to us on our social media channels or anything like that. We're happy to get questions from lots of different places, but this one comes from the Discord, and the question is, who are the best the phrase used was one-trick ponies in the game today. I find that a little that feels a little diminutive. I don't want to make it seem like we're criticizing any of these players. So I want to think about it as players who maybe have a superpower that you know them for, a skill that really they are in excess of. The question pointed at Bo Kittredge as being the primary example of like someone who made a career out of having a specific skill set. So Bo's obviously one of the greatest players of all time, and I think it's a little flattening to say he has one skill set. So the athletes that I'm thinking about are players who have a superpower. I don't want it to seem like I think that they can't play beyond this specific ability. But I started to think about who are some of these players. I'll give some examples that were responses for folks in our Discord as well. So players that jumped out to me, I think the easiest, like the most obvious answer are players who are extremely athletic, particularly players who excel in the deep space or on defense. So I thought about players like K-Spa, Veronica Kalagius-Spolaris, or Ronnie Eater and Molly Brown, players who are extremely strong in specific areas. K-Spa is like this hard running player, like just runs you into the ground. Ronnie Eater does a lot of the same things, but really just grinds you out on defense. Kez Gessel, Ashley Buke. These are players who jump out to me. Jasper Tom as a handler defender, area that I think is like a very specific skill set, being someone who's really good on handler defense. Jasper Tom, well known for that. And then I was like, okay, I got to branch out past just these players who are really quick or nimble or really fast and tall, because I think there's a lot of examples of that. So I tried to think of players maybe who have specific skill sets offensively. Jake Juzak from Shame is someone who comes to mind for me. Just really big body and huge standstill thrower. Calvin Trissolini, I actually don't think he played Elite Club last year, but formerly of AMP. Another player who I think had like a really refined throwing skill set, but really was best, I feel like, operating as a standstill thrower in a unique way. I mentioned these players who were talking about UBC, but I think I can make a case for Rita Kawabata, who's just an absolute burner, just so fast, and has made a living off of speed and quickness, and has carved out a very long, successful Ultimate career. And as a counterpoint, Catherine Menzies, I should say, better known as Chewy. Chewy, obviously, I think this is another example of like a person who I think is really well-rounded. Chewy is an offensive force and has been for her entire career, but she's so good at throwing big around backhands. And I've seen entire points just dominated by how do we get Chewy the ball in a position to throw a big around backhand? It's a skill unto itself. Like I think most people would know Chewy for being fast, but that is a thing that is like a Chewy superpower in my mind. Alex Davis, maybe another player you could think about as somebody who like has a superpower that makes them hard to match up with. People brought up in the chat, Charlie McCutcheon, Jabron Meeser, Muffin for the forehand huck. If we're thinking players with big forehands, Samia Ishmael, Leah Schwartz, obviously these players could do more than throw big forehands, but they have really, really big forehands. So those are players who I'd also think about that as having that superpower that allows them to take over the game in a very specific way. My producer, Lindsay Sue, says Jamie Erickson pulls. That is a great idea. Pullers, big time pullers. That is a Marquez Brownlee is another person I think who's really known for his pulls. So big time pullers, another specialist category. So sometimes I wonder, would the game be better if you literally if the puller didn't have to play? What if you just had an eighth player come on, they pulled, they ran off the field? True specialists in the game. I don't really think that would make it better, but that's gonna do it for our question of the week, and it's gonna wrap us up for Deep Look this week. Before you go, if you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please, it's helpful. Hit us with the like, hit us with the thumbs up. If you were watching this, we need the support. Hit us with the thumbs up. It takes a second to do. Helps the channel out a lot. But for our missing co-host Charlie Eisenhood, I'm Keith Rayner. We will catch you next week here on Deep Look.